Hi, my name is John Berghauser, and this video is an introduction to a workshop that we in Stauros Ministries have developed. I'm in my 18th year working full-time with Stauros Ministries. Our parent organization is the Stauros Foundation in the United Kingdom. The simple, short message, if you will, of Stauros, our objective, our mission, is to meet men and women who are struggling with various forms of addictions, particularly with drugs and alcohol, and help them with what they need to get themselves turned around. We have a secondary goal, if you will, or you can interchange them, that we want to help them to see that turning themselves to God through Jesus Christ is really the answer to what they're looking for. And some of you may be watching this and don't agree with that, or don't have any sort of sense of why that's important, why that should be important. This video today and then ensuing videos will help to clarify that a bit. That's part of the purpose of the workshop we have put together. I want to give you a brief history of my life, testimony, if you will, in brevity, to give you a bit of a snapshot or a little bit of an idea of why we put this workshop together and why we feel it's important. I was raised on a farm without really having neighbors to speak of, and so we were fairly isolated. I'm the youngest of 6 children, so I did have a brother and sisters, and my parents with us, but yet there was that sense of isolation and loneliness that just is natural when you live on a farm. I discovered in more recent years that I would have a introverted personality type, and again, some folks don't find that to be of great value, but our workshop, we won't talk about that much today, but our workshop does talk about that a little bit because it's important to understand that, and we'll explain why. And also, I found out in recent years that because of my strong German background, there's a bit of a stoicism, there's a bit of a seeming standoffishness that I have, and I discovered some of that has to do with the bloodline, and again, we'll touch on that briefly as we go through the objectives of the workshop. But those things combined caused me to be very isolating, be very alone feeling as a youngster. I remember being very, very young, wondering why I was here, and looking back today, a 5-6-year-old should never be thinking those things, but I was. And again, back then in the 60s, even if I would have shared it, there probably wasn't anything anybody would have done. The good or the bad today is that there are lots of areas of help and treatment and just sort of sensitivity and attention to those things. By age 13, I began using substances, drinking some and using marijuana, and by age 16, I moved on to fairly significantly harder drugs. Back in those days, hallucinogens and barbiturates and various pills and things. And really by the time I was 18, round about there, this is a rough timeline, about the time I was 18, I was full-blown into a daily use of substances in some way, shape, or form. And I had somewhat learned to use stimulants to rise my mood, to use barbiturates, and I didn't really use depressants as such, but some of the things that existed back then I would have used to calm myself down, and certainly alcohol would have deadened my senses and helped me sleep. And so there was that kind of perpetual cycle. That cycle went on ultimately until age 33 for 20 years. During that time, I was raised in church, and I was exposed to the things of God, and understood a bit about who Jesus was and who God was as best I was taught, as best I paid attention. And I was involved in some church activities off and on in my as a youngster and then into my early teens. As an older teen, I turned away from all that and just walked away from those things, not seeing any value. But during that period, I still in the back of my mind would think sometimes that maybe God, whoever he was, could help me. I tried when I was around 18 to end my life, and I was obviously unsuccessful. Then about age 24, again, a big chunk of time there, I attempted again. And I was unsuccessful, obviously. But at that time, I cried out to God, and I said, God, if you're real, I don't remember what I said exactly, but it was something like that. If you're really who I was raised to think you are, can you help me? Now, nothing really changed in my life, practically speaking, at that time. But I got a measure of strength that I'm not sure I even recognized then, but looking back, I see that that came in. So, but what I did was I tried to do various life changes to make my life better. I got a haircut, I tried to clean up a bit. I got a new vehicle. I tried to advance in my job. I was doing fairly well in the work community. I was a foreman for a utility contractor running heavy equipment and supervising a crew, and then various crews and such. But then even went on after that at age 27 to get married. I didn't plan that to help myself out. I met my wife still of today back then, and we came to love each other and made a decision to be married, and we did at age 27. And then the next 6 years were, she was a partier as well, as we would call it, but really got harder and heavier, I suppose, into some drugs as well after meeting me, and we certainly did quite a bit of that. 6 years passed by, and I wound up getting arrested 3 times over an 18-month period for drunk driving, and things were really chaotic in that period. My marriage was about ready to end, and I cried out to God again. My last arrest, I was pulled over for drunk driving in a blackout state, and I woke up, so to speak. Well, I did wake up in the jail up in Carroll County, which is a fair distance from where I lived. I was in a blackout, drove up that way for some reason, and was arrested. And I woke up, and that was the 3rd time I tried to end my life over that weekend. But when I came home after a pastor I was seeing, my wife and I were seeing for counsel, he called my wife and said, "John's not in good shape at all. If you would see fit to talk with him or whatever it might be helpful." And so I went back to my apartment, and really I think it was to pack my clothing and to take a shower, because I hadn't showered since I was arrested on that Friday evening. And so I was dirty and stinking and miserable and very despondent. But I did take a shower, and in the shower I got a glimmer of hope that I hadn't had before, that maybe things could be okay. And as I got out of the shower, my wife, unbeknownst to me, had been lying on the bed crying, and she said to me she didn't want me to leave. When she had announced on that Friday that I was to leave, it wasn't an idle threat, it was a serious commitment, and understandably so. And so that Sunday, looking back, we believe we got saved on that day. We didn't understand things, we just knew that something changed in us. Well, a few months later, the pastor of the church we were attending, White Marsh Baptist Church, he came by and sat with us and asked if we wanted to pray for salvation. And I almost look at it as in the book of Acts, when Peter and John went to the Samaritans, and they had shared with them about the Holy Spirit. It says in there, I'm just sort of paraphrasing, it's been a while since I've read that section, but they had not yet been filled with the Holy Spirit, but they had been professing their faith in Jesus Christ. And so I'm not saying exactly that's what went on, but it was similar to that. It was kind of a confirmation of what had already happened. And so from that point on, age 33 till now, I'm 58, so that was 25 years ago, we began to dedicate and devote ourselves to our Lord Jesus Christ and learn about Him. Well, that was in 1996. Not long after that, actually at that very time, there was a gentleman named Tom Eakins coming over from Northern Ireland from a ministry called Stauros, and won't get into that backstory now, how that came about, but he came over. I didn't know him, but I met him through some meetings that some friends were running. He would be speaking, and he said 2 things that really struck me. He said many things, but 2 that really struck me and stuck with me was a verse in 2 Corinthians 5:17. I've had it on my business card for years, and we put it on a lot of our literature. It says, again, sort of a paraphrase of several versions, "If any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new." And I thought, that sounds good. I want to know more about that. I would love to think that my past is the past, literally. It's not part of me still. I'm just trying a day at a time to be clean and do the best I can, but I actually can be different. And the other thing he said was that he worked for a ministry that met with people on a one-to-one basis. Now, that appealed to me very much as well. And part of that goes back to what I mentioned earlier, being an introverted guy and being Teutonic, not really enjoying being around crowds and lots of people, and having a introverted personality type and not really being very socially adept. That appealed to me because in that time I was mandated by the court system to go to lots of recovery meetings, and I did because I had to, but I struggled with them, and then I questioned myself because I thought, well, if I'm struggling, I guess I'm destined for a relapse because that's what you're told. If you don't sort of learn to hug and kiss and share your story openly with whoever's there, I was uncomfortable with all those things, and I never gained a comfort with them. And I spent significant time, really a couple of years, stressing over that, more than a couple of years. And then when I thought, well, could we be gathering more on a one-to-one and in very small groupings and sharing what I'm going through with meaningfully and openly with people that I knew I could trust, not with just whomever was in the room, that I think would be better for me and help me out more. So I then pursued Tom and asked him about being involved with Stauros, and in the year 2000 we began a Stauros meeting, a small gathering in our home, and we took our first trip to Ireland to attend the first international conference of the Stauros Foundation. And we were struck that night, my wife and I, during one of the meetings. The title of one of the messages was The Surrender of Self. And on that evening, Dr. Sandy Roger was preaching, and he talked about the surrender of self. And we prayed to God. We asked God to help us know His will for our lives. And He spoke to us that night that we were going to be involved in ministry work. And we didn't know exactly where at the time, but we had a sense it would be with Stauros, but we weren't sure. And so we began praying. And then in 2002, when Tom was over and some of the gentlemen from Stauros were in the States, we sat with the U.S. Board of Directors and expressed to them that a year hence, in 2003, I plan to leave my work and dedicate myself and dedicate ourselves to full-time work in Stauros. So in 2003, we did that very thing. I left the construction industry and began working with Stauros on a full-time basis, and still am to this day. Several years ago, fast forward quite a number of years, several years ago, when Arthur Williams, the founder of Stauros Foundation, was over in America, we were talking and that sort of thing, and that's when he said to me he said to me, John, you're quite Teutonic, and I had no idea what that meant, and I was kind of embarrassed to ask him, so I just thanked him and that sort of thing, and then went home and got on the internet as we do, and Googled that and learned about that. And it's, again, without going in depth, it's a trait of the Germanic people, Scandinavians, where they tend to be a little more seemingly standoffish, a little more private, a little more quiet, whatever it might be. And I thought, maybe it's not that I've just messed myself up with drugs and I just have grown up so nervous and anxious that I'm just never going to be able to socialize meaningfully and do those things. I said, maybe that's part of how God designed me. And so I began investigating that and found a lot of value in that. The real short contrast to that would be the Romantics, which would be the Italians and French, and those who tend to hug and kiss and really are more flamboyant with their emotions. Now, there's many other things that play into this. That's not a comprehensive application, but it is helpful to recognize that, to understand. And it actually set me free when I started to realize that I'm not just damaged property that can try to do the best I can to manage through life, but actually it's part of how God has made me. That I can learn to use it for God's glory and to the advantage of others like myself who find themselves just uncomfortable with the gatherings and having to share their struggles in groups of people they don't know. And that sort of thing. So Stauros, we don't reserve ourselves just for that. We certainly have group meetings, have had them off and on over the years in various forums from time to time, and still do, whether it be very small groupings of a couple of folks together or larger groupings, and we do outreaches and all kinds of things. But the bulk of our work is meeting with a man or a woman, as is appropriate for myself, but meeting with them one-to-one, trying to help them navigate life. And that sounds so simple and basic, but it's not as simple as it sounds. But one of the things that we did, and that brings me to the introduction to our workshop, is we put together a workshop. We started about 3 years ago and have modified it and refined it over the years, and I'm sure we will as we learn things. I'll bring that up as we get into it. But we put it together. It's entitled Caring for the Addicted Through Discipleship. This is a picture of the cover. You can't see it really well, but just wanted to kind of give you a glimpse of that. And on the cover it says that it's a discussion-oriented format that is designed for individuals and groups who are currently helping people struggling through an addiction, or for groups who want to be better equipped to reach out to those individuals. It's not a workshop for the addicted to find out how to better manage and cope, so to speak. It's for the helper. It's designed for the helper or the potential helper, the caring person who wants to know a little bit more about how to identify and recognize what's going on in their loved ones. So this is a booklet that we use during the workshop. In the back flap, I have 2 sheets, and one of them is a individual assessment checklist. And this is something that you can say, well, if I'm going to visit someone, if I'm going to talk to my son, my daughter, my husband, my father, whomever it might be, my neighbor, and it's clear that they've already opened up that they have some issue with an addiction, so I'm not putting on something they haven't told me. I might ask them a few questions, maybe not take this sheet with me, but I would certainly maybe memorize a few of these that we can ask. And it says this: how long has whatever it might be been a life-dominating issue? You'll find a lot of times people don't realize how long it has been dominating. I think of it as, addiction in my later years, but really it does go back to when I was a youngster and at age 13. When did you first notice a problem? For me, it was probably around age 18 to 20 when I first noticed that things were really out of control. Have others told you they see a problem? Has this matter affected your relationships? What have you already done to try to address these issues? People have already done a lot of things oftentimes, and so we don't want to duplicate what they've already done. We want to try to see, unless we think that would work in a different fashion or form, but maybe it is a different approach that they need. What have you found to be helpful? Maybe we can help them redo those things. Did you see God as helpful? That's an opportunity to see if the things of God are in their mind or on their mind. And then if so, if you found God helpful, how would you characterize your relationship with Him? Because we do want to share the gospel. We are evangelical, our ministry. And so ultimately we do want to share salvation through Jesus Christ with folks that they might look to Him for that help. The second sheet is a pre- and post-course assessment worksheet. And on here, we identify the 4 objectives that are in the booklet. And we ask, before the workshop, as people sit down, how do they think they fare on these 4 objectives? Then after the workshop, we ask them, how do they think they fare on them now? And then at the bottom of the sheet, we have 2 sections. What did you find most beneficial from the workshop? And what did you see that wasn't covered that you may think would be better covered? And we've already modified some things based on responses. The 4 objectives. Number 1, do you consider addiction to be a spiritual issue? In other words, it's not just behavior modification that's needed. Certainly behavior modification is needed, but do we understand the depth of it? Somebody isn't just hard-headed because they don't want to stop. They're just a knucklehead. They're just a hard-head. Whatever words we might put on them. It might be that it's a deep, deep thing going on, which it was for me. As we go through these objectives in later videos, I'll certainly be bringing up some personal things, not as much as today, but bringing up some personal things because this largely was born out of my experience personally as an addict and as one who was deeply troubled, and then also as now a helper, if you will, for these years. So do you consider it to be a spiritual issue? A lot of people do circle no in the pre-course assessment. The second one, do you understand the church's role in caring for the addict? Do you understand why there is a need for care and discipleship? It isn't simply telling people what to do, offering to them resources, although we can do all those things. But do we understand the need to join in with them? and a deeper level, or to find somebody to join in with them on a deeper level. The third one, do you see yourself offering discipleship the way that Jesus did? And in that objective, when we cover that, you'll see, but we go through various encounters that Jesus had with individuals, and they were quite different. And so it isn't, everybody just needs to go to a meeting, everybody just needs to do this, everybody just needs to do that. It can vary from individual. It does vary from individual to individual. So we want to look at some of the ways that Jesus would have dealt with various individuals. And then the fourth is, do you think you're equipped to minister to an addict? And in that section of the workshop, we go through some of the relationship building. We call them the nuts and bolts, the do's and don'ts, what to watch for, what to offer, what to not commit to, knowing what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, those kind of things. So in the next videos, we're going to go through each objective one at a time, and it'll be hopefully a shorter video. I told my wife I wanted to preface today with a bit of a testimony, because I think that's significant to why we feel impassioned about presenting this workshop. Because I can't say that people didn't understand me necessarily, but I don't think they did. I didn't understand myself. But as I grew, I started to understand myself. And our goal is to help others sooner than later understand themselves and or their loved ones to better help them. That's all. It's really not trying to get into the psychology and the depths of somebody's psyche, but really just to understand why they are responding or aren't responding to whatever is offered, and then know what maybe some options are to offer to them. So in the fourth objective, we do that. We talk about some of the things to look for. When we hit a roadblock, what can we do? If we find something is successful, how can we further that along? So I hope this was helpful today. Again, just to give you an introduction to the workshop we have. The way this is implemented right now, because of the coronavirus, we're doing this in May of 2020. We are not able to present the workshop. We were supposed to do it at several churches. Actually, we were scheduled this Saturday, the 30th of May, to be in West Virginia. We're not able to. We hope to do it sooner than later. But that prompted us to make these videos, which we wanted to do anyway. But I hope that you'll tune in. This will be on our Stauros Ministries YouTube channel, and I'll put it on Facebook as well. But I hope you'll tune in and bookmark it and look for ensuing videos. We'll try to do them sooner than later, at least one a week, if not more frequently. And we'll be going through the four objectives, one at a time, talking about them. If any of you are interested in following along through these videos, then please send an email to me, john@stauros.com. You can look on our, if you're seeing this, you'll know how to spell Stauros. It'll be on there, Stauros. So John, John, @stauros.com. Email, and I can send you out this booklet in a PDF form, and you can have it in front of you as we go through the videos, because it would be helpful. The other is that we anticipate eventually we'll be back together face-to-face, whether it's spaced out social distancing or whether it's whatever it might be. We'd love an opportunity to come to your group or your church to present the workshop in person. It's a little better that way. We can have interactive discussion and go over it. So let us know. Hopefully you'll tune in and watch the ensuing videos and benefit some. Again, really the goal is to be better equipped at providing help and hope to those around us who are struggling with various forms of addictions, life-dominating issues, and learn how we can be better equipped at that. And we also learn as well as we do the workshops. We hear people tell us things that are helpful to us, because we don't know it all. We don't claim to know it all. We just have an approach that's been successful through its changes over the years as well. So we want to provide that. We hope you'll tune back in with us for the next videos. Thank you very much.